Welcome to this month's Schuman Talk, where we discuss issues we face in Europe today in the light of Robert Schuman's vision for a community of peoples deeply rooted in Christian values. I'm Jeff Fountain, and I'm talking to you from the heart of Amsterdam. And we go back to May the 9th, 1950 at 6 p.m. when the French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman gave a 3-minute speech in which he laid the foundation for the European House, where today 500 million Europeans live together in peace and cooperation. And this is why we do this Schuman Talk each month on the 9th of the month at 6 p.m. to remind us of this defining moment of post-war Europe, for it launched a European movement for peace and unity that has led to today's European Union. You see, peace did not come at the end of the Second World War. The war ended, but peace really didn't get established for another 5 years when the plan was put on the table by Robert Schuman for European integration. And there has been unprecedented peace between EU member states ever since. Now, Schuman was a devout Christian. He lived an almost monk-like life. He seriously considered entering the priesthood, but his best friend advised him to remain a layman. And he said, the saints of the future will be saints dressed in suits. And yet, he remained single all his life. So, what does that have to do with the subject that we're talking about this month, celebrating and affirming marriage? Well, as I said, Schuman was a devout believer. He believed in the sacrament of matrimony, as it's kind of officially and traditionally called, something God has ordained for flourishing human life and for society. Schuman believed and affirmed very strongly Christian ethics and morality, including the understanding of chastity outside of marriage and fidelity within the marriage covenant. But like Schuman, not everyone is called to marriage. He was very fulfilled in his calling to singleness. But if you do happen to be married, then our guest this month, Richard Kane, the founder of Marriage Week, wants to say something to you. So welcome, Richard. You're joining us now from Zagreb, but usually you're to be found in England. That's correct. What are you doing in Zagreb?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I guess it is a show. It's lovely to be here. And I'm here in Zagreb because I was invited to come to the launch event for Marriage Week Croatia for their 10th anniversary, which took place last night. And there was a gathering here in the city with different speakers and different contributors and collaborated to create a new book about how to have a happy marriage. And myself and my wife came along and said a few words, and they were very nice to us and gave us a little gift. And there you are. It all helps, doesn't it? So that's why we're here, because of course Marriage Week is now in 28 countries all around the world, and in most countries it's really effective. In a few countries it's a bit sleepy, but mostly it's like, it has a real impact in the media, in the impact on policymakers, and of course a lot of local activity going through local churches.
Well, Richard, you said this event was last night. I think you meant Wednesday night, when Marriage Week started on the 7th, going through to 14th, Valentine's Day. So tell us more about it. What is Marriage Week, and how and why did it get started?
Well, it started ages ago, almost. Well, it's very cool to say, oh, it was just an accident, it didn't really happen. But the truth is, there was a cunning plan. And it was, at the time, I had a job as director of a charity that was bringing together all the marriage-related organizations in the UK. And we got them all together, and I said to them, all these leaders, look, why don't we do something really positive? Because all our ministries are orientated towards counseling and when there's been a crisis and messy stuff. And quite often at that stage, the couples are very focused on splitting up anyway. Not that those interventions aren't of value, because they are, but I just wanted to do something that would be a celebration. And I realized that, when we go to a wedding and the couple walk up the aisle and they do the whole thing, and then afterwards we pat them on the back and we say, "Oh, well done, you've done a great thing," and then they're on their own, and there's lots of obvious problems to do with in-laws, financials, objectives, all the rest of it like that, that we don't really help the couple with at all. So I thought, I wonder if we could do something like an aid memoir to the nation that would say, if you're fortunate enough to be in a marriage, then if you're fortunate enough to be in a marriage, then you should look after it. And this is how you look after it. This is how you invest in it. This is what you can do, just as a memory, as a aid memoir. And so I got all these organizations together and they said, "Oh, that's great, Richard. If you do it, we'll support you." And I was a bit younger and more stupid, and I thought that was a green light. And off we went. And then I remember meeting with them all just a few weeks before the first ever National Marriage Week. And they were all excited because they'd get invited to speak here and speak there and all. And they said, "What's wrong with you, Richard?" And I said, "Well, I've told everybody this is going to be a media campaign." And they said, "Yes." I said, "But nobody in the media knows anything about it. It's just like a secret. It's one of those Christian things that was almost really good, but was actually really average." And I wanted to affect the nation. Didn't want to just lark about. And so then they said, "Oh, don't worry about it." And then I went home, and then I got a phone call. I don't know if you've ever had a phone call that changed your life, but this was mine. It was from a very posh lady, and she said to me, "Mr. Kane, I work for the Lord Chancellor." The Lord Chancellor is one of the most senior ministers in the government in the UK. She said, "He wants to know, are you doing anything to launch your National Marriage Week in London?" And I said, "No, but we'd like to." And she said, "Well, if we, which is the government, if we put on an event for you, and if we had your logo as the backdrop, and if we invited all the family organizations and the marriage organizations and all the media to come, and the minister made a speech at it, would you, Mr. Kane, be free to host it?" So, of course, I said, "I'll just check my diary to see if I'm going free on that day." And I got a little giggle. Anyway, pretty much that's what happened. I mean, along the way, there was a meeting with these ministers, a planning meeting, and they were going through the protocol. Well, you sit here and he'll sit there, and as Brits do. And I said, "Wait a minute, why are you doing this?" And they said, "Well, I'm sorry." And I said, "Look, you're really, really important. The Lord Chancellor is the Speaker of the Upper House. He's in charge of all the judiciary in the Prime Minister's cabinet, and we're just a tiny charity. We're so poor. I'm working from the garage in my house, and it doesn't even have a window. So why are you doing this?" And they looked at each other, and one of them got a finger out, and she pointed, and she said, "Because, Mr. Kane, you are National Marriage Week, and Her Majesty's government wants to do this with you." And then I thought, you see, at that moment in time, this had never happened. You see, it didn't exist. So I thought, I've convinced Her Majesty's government something exists. It doesn't really exist. Anyway, then we launched it, and it turned into the biggest media thing of the year. The industry magazine PR Week invited us along to their annual awards and bestowed on us the second, the runner-up in the best promotional activity of the year. Wow. It was such a, it was like all over the news.
What year? What year?
Sorry?
What year are we talking about?
This was February 1987.
Okay. Now,
97. February 97.
Before we go further down that road, I remember once you telling me you were standing in some home appliance, home improvement place at the checkout line, and you had a big thought. What was that?
Yeah, this all happened. It was like a God thing, because the way everything chimes simultaneously, and you go, "Oh my goodness!" Because the other thing that happened was, you're absolutely right, Jeff. I was standing in a DIY store in a queue, and I had my wallpaper and paint because we were fixing up our old house, and I looked at everybody, and everybody was focused on the same thing, buying tiles and bits of wood and all that nonsense, And I thought, isn't it funny, we're really good at spending money and time and effort on enhancing the home, but we never really think about enhancing the relationship, which is normally why you have a home within which to inhabit, you know. And I thought, forget the paint and wallpaper. Why don't we focus on, like, how do you resolve conflict? You know, how do you improve your communication? You know, what's your love language? You know, how do you forgive each other when you have a breakdown? I thought we're focusing all wrongly. We should really focus on the skills you need to have a great. Everybody who marries, they want it to work. You know, they're not starting out thinking, "Oh, I hope this is going to be a disaster," but they haven't got the skills. You know, they trip up accidentally and get a bit sloppy and lazy, and that's where it goes wrong. It's not intentional, and that's where marriage week comes in, because it's a reminder. It goes against the sloppiness. You go, "Oh yeah, that's right. I need to improve my fitness. Yeah, that's right. I need to do something, you know, to look after my relationship." Yes, so that was happening simultaneously. You're right.
So I love the picture you gave before. It's more like so often we concentrate at the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff instead of putting a fence at the top of the cliff and celebrating, stirring the imagination of what marriage should be and can be. But it requires investment of time. I think for a lot of males, especially, we find it hard to think, well, we need to do something special about marriage. You know, there's nothing wrong with my marriage, but we don't approach our marriages like we approach the maintenance of our car. You know, we keep our car well oiled and polished and so on. Why don't we invest in the same maintenance of this relationship? That's your message, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's like I remember one time, you know, when they do an interview on the radio or something, there's always a pre-interview where they ring up and rehearse, you know, the issues. You see, and there was a lady from ITV, which is like the BBC in the UK, and she phoned up and we were having a chat. You know, she's asking me about all this kind of stuff, you know, and it was basically, why do we need a marriage week? And I said, well, this is for all the couples that are trying to make a success. You know, why not? Why not encourage everybody once a year? And she went, yeah, that's right. And then she leaned in a little bit and she said, Mr. Kane, is it like you're trying to get everybody to talk about what do you have to do to have a good relationship? And I said, yeah, pretty much. And she leaned in a bit more. She said, well, I need to tell you, in our newsroom here, we've done no work all morning because we've just been talking about what do you have to do to have a happy marriage. So from my perspective, and she's a journalist, she said, this is a massive success because we've actually done exactly what you wanted us to do.
So your planting of this idea got right to the top in Britain, and it led to encounters with some pretty important people. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and the first year, obviously, we had that event I mentioned with the Lord Chancellor on the Tuesday. And then I thought, oh, I wonder if we could do something with the Prime Minister, you know, on Thursday, which is the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. So I knew there was an election coming up. So I made that phone call everybody always wants to make. Get me Downing Street, you know. And I spoke to a press officer, and he, you know, I made a pitch. You know, can we present to it? No. You know, we've just done this thing with Lord Chancellor. No. All right. So then I called the opposition. You see, because an election was looming. The opposition was just cusping. You know, everybody knew they were going to win, and they said, this is how long ago. They said, are you able to fax over some information? Which I did, and then I waited until 5 to 5. And then I called the guy back at Downing Street and I said, it's me again. He said, oh, yeah, what is it? I said, well, I just want to bring something to your attention. And he said, yeah, what's that? I said, well, we've heard back from the Labour Party, and from you, we've heard nothing, which was technically true. And he said, they've responded, have they? I said, yes. Because they'd asked me to fax over information, you know. So then they said, okay. He said, what's your number? So I gave him my, and he called me back a few minutes later. And he said, I've got it all organised. 9 o'clock in the morning, Downing Street, Prime Minister and his wife, 12 red roses. And would you please bring a woman, preferably your wife?
So that
So
explains who these people are in this photo. I recognize John Major on the left, and that's his wife, Norma. Who are the
yeah.
other two people?
Well, it's me with hair in the grey suit,
And without glasses.
yeah, and in between it's Maria, my wife of now 36 years, who accompanies me everywhere and is a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Anyway,
You mean
what
you've been
happened?
married for 36 years? You're not saying she's 36 years old now.
Yeah. Anyway, what happened? Because on year one, we were at this very lofty level with media, VIPs, all the rest of it. It was like after that, it was like, well, let's continue at this level. So the year after, we did the same photo with Tony Blair and Sherry, and then we started attracting people like the Jonathan Sachs, the former, well, late Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Archbishop of Westminster, and then people from other countries. They began getting in contact, and each year we'd have a media event to launch it, and we'd get these important people along to come and not do a talk, but just do a few minutes, basically say, this is what I believe in, this is what I support, And the favorite was always the chief rabbi, because he was great fun. He died way too early, really. But he would always come along and go, "Oh, I love being invited to Marriage Week. Marriage Week is my favorite week of the year." And you have all this, and the media loved him. Everybody loved him, and of course others as well. So we managed to keep it at that A-list kind of level, which was not always easy, but I felt was really important,
Richard, you're taking me back, I don't know how many years, maybe 15 years, where you invited me to come to the opening of Marriage Week in London, in Westminster, in the House of Parliament there. And indeed, Archbishop Rowan Williams was there, and Jonathan Sachs. He wasn't not yet Lord Sachs. I actually have a photo of him. We're shaking hands, and my cheek was all blue and black. I'd just come up from Budapest, where I'd had some implants put in, and so I was all bruised, and I was tempted to kind of make that into a little cartoon with him saying, "See what happens when you turn the other cheek." But that was a very memorable event, and it was obvious that your message, done in your humble way, had so landed and touched a real nerve for the whole nation. So then it began to spread. Tell us about that.
Yes. So then the phone started to ring, and we got a call from a group connected with the Evangelical Alliance in the Czech Republic, and also a group connected with Youth with a Mission Family Ministries in Switzerland. And we decided to, and basically the question was, could you help us to put on, in order to launch a Marriage Week in our countries? So we encouraged this. We did a pilot in Switzerland and also in Prague, and they went well. And then a group started in Hungary, and then a group started in the States, and then we formed a Swiss International Association, because the idea was we didn't want to form an organization with controls, but we wanted to form an association with inspiration and encouragement. And so each national project is autonomous, and they affiliate to the International Association in Switzerland, of which I am the president. You can call me Mr. President if you must, but it doesn't mean anything. And so on we go. And so then obviously,
so just let me ask you this. You mentioned Youth with a Mission. What has been your association with Youth with a Mission?
Well, Youth with a Mission, the family ministries.
No, I mean going back earlier.
Oh well, I spent 2 years in Youth with a Mission that were very formative for me in about 1984 to 86. I completed the DTS. I was a staff member in London. We were the Central London Outreach Team, CLOTS for short. And we used to go to the speakers corner and irritate everybody enormously. And we used to go and speak at Leicester Square on an evening and irritate everybody even more, particularly the police who used to chase us away because we used to block the whole square talking about families and relationships. People are really interested in how do you make your family work? How do you make your marriage work? That's all we'd speak about, and the crowds would stop. So yeah, you used to do that, and that was very important for me. That was a real a defining era in my life.
And did you meet anybody special there?
Yeah, Maria, my wife. I met her in the washing up room at Homestead Manor, and I thought she seemed like a really good catch, and of course she was.
She's from Sweden.
Yeah, from Sweden originally, and but she's lived here with me since we married all those years ago, and we have 3 grown-up children. They're all artistic and work in media, so they're all impoverished, but enjoy what they do.
Well, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were telling about the Czech Republic.
Oh yes, so we did a pilot there, and I went over and helped them, and then we did the pilot in Geneva, and then other countries just either contacted us or started themselves. So then we formed this international association, and pretty quickly we had like 8 or 9 nations all on the boil with this. So we started to have a conference every other year, just for all the leaders to come together and stuff. And we're now up to about 28 countries around the world, which is fairly significant. And of course, if you're from I guess a big country like America, it doesn't really matter that you're part of an international association. But if you're a small country like Bulgaria and you say, "Oh, I'm part of an international network," that means a lot, and really helps those people, and it encourages them,
So you've been gathering leaders and inspiring them. They inspire each other.
Yeah.
At these conferences. Maybe we've got some photos of these gatherings.
Yeah.
You could explain.
Okay, this is a few years ago. This is the end of the leaders conference. That's why everybody looks so happy, because it's over in Vienna, and all these people are people from different countries. I can see Denmark there, Romania, Holland. Oh goodness!
I can actually see my wife right in the middle there. Yeah.
Yeah, there she is, Rumkit, and we get together and largely explain what we've been up to, and get inspiration from each other, and it's a sharing of ideas, and it works really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else do we have in the way of photos?
This is a regional group in Germany. In Germany, they've adopted Marriage Week in such a big way. They no longer have a national board. What they have is regional boards all over the country. So I think this is a group in Saxony, and they have their own website, their own Facebook, and they organize events. I mean, fundamentally, what's happening in the expression of Marriage Week in Saxony is that they'll have, I don't know, a couple of hundred events in their area, and those events will be largely in church, but not all, in town halls, where they'll invite all the couples that have been in a marriage relationship for 20 years, 25 years, and they have sort of a party to honor them and to celebrate them. And so, and they go out on the streets in the squares, and they've got these balloons, and then they've got like a load of bags with like take home your Marriage Week printed on it, and in there they've got chocolates and a romantic movie and some flowers and stuff like that. And it's just, you see, it's fundamentally the message of Marriage Week is about, it's for people that want to bless their nation. It's not just about couples who are insanely excited about marriage. There are people like that, but lots of others are just go, I just want to do something positive for the people where I live, just to bless them and encourage them.
So what you've created is not just in Britain, but it's now spreading out with all sorts of networks of people who are encouraging each other, as well as then starting the same kind of movements in their own country. This is a bit funny. What's this all about? Now let's go back to that one. Yeah.
You're right, Jeff. You put your finger on it. It gives good. Now you can quote me on this. Okay. It gives good people a good excuse to do a good thing. So in Slovakia, for years and years, the group there have had the support of the First Lady. She sends a letter. Now, if they weren't doing Marriage Week Slovakia, the First Lady wouldn't be sending a letter, because nobody sends a letter into a vacuum. But because the folks there are organized, they go, we are Marriage Week Slovakia, it seems appropriate for her in her office to send a letter of support. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. Now, what they've done in Slovakia superbly is, having had a letter from the First Lady for a few years, now her and her husband, excuse me. So now her and her husband, for last year, they approached the team and they said, we've been sending a letter for a while. Yes, thank you very much. For next year, what we'd like to do is we'd like to make, for Marriage Week Slovakia, a YouTube video of us talking about our marriage. This is the Prime Minister and the First Lady, which they did. That they filmed themselves like in a cafe kind of environment on sofas, talking about, you know, the challenges they've had and the importance of their marriage and all the rest of it. And then they post it on YouTube with a link. You know, this is for Marriage Week Slovakia. Got obviously thousands and thousands of views. Now, if there wasn't a Marriage Week Slovakia, would they be doing a video like that? No, they wouldn't. So apart from anything else, what Marriage Week does is it gives people a genuine reason / excuse to do a good thing.
Richard, was this the Prime Minister you're talking about of Slovakia?
Yeah.
Ed Hager?
You know.
Yeah, I think it must have been Ed Hager, who was a guest a couple of months ago on the Schuman. Wonderful. Now, you mentioned Bulgaria. Let's see this next slide. We see an Orthodox priest is involved here. And then the next photo shows a television interview. I think this is also Bulgaria. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm the guy in blue.
On the left. Okay. Yes.
And next to
we
me,
recognize you now with your glasses on. Yeah.
Yeah. Next to me is Maria, my wife, and then the third one is the coordinator in Bulgaria. Her name is Michaela, and we're on TV because we started out all those years ago of having a strong presence in the media, pretty much still do in most countries. And what you have here is Bulgarian national TV doing a little interview with us. I don't know what we're on about. It was a few years ago, but I mean, this is normal. So, for example, last night in Zagreb, they had the national TV news along, and then also their version of BBC Radio 4. And as I asked the presenter, "Oh, you putting this out?" She said, "Oh, we love stuff like this. We love stuff that communicates that we're a conservative nation," which I thought was interesting, because where we come from in the liberal West, you wouldn't really want to say that, particularly if you were in the media. But there you are.
Now, tell me, what fruit do you see? You already begun to describe it, but let's have a look at the bigger picture. What's some of the fruit that you've seen over these years since you started National Marriage Week?
Have you got a slide there with those statistics on?
I think so. Yeah, let's have a look at that. The numbers. They're coming anyway. There we go.
All right. Well,
out of date now, but
well, this is like each year we reckon something north of 5,000 people take a lead in organizing something for Marriage Week somewhere in the world. It's probably a lot more than that. Like in America, they've got 2/3 of all the Catholic parishes have adopted National Marriage Week. So,
Wow.
you know, I mean, that's enormous. That's like voluminous amounts of people.
Yes.
So 5,200 is probably low. And we reckon also, you know, 624,000 people physically attend a Marriage Week event. It's going to be a lot more than that. That's people that like get off their backside and they go like, oh, well, I might not go to church, but I'm going to church because that's where this event is. Because I identify with marriage. I want to do something to celebrate marriage. I want to learn something. I read about it in the press or something. They go. And then at least 520 million people will have heard something about Marriage Week on media. Well, you know, that's easy to quantify. And 26 nations, no, 28. Now, interestingly, because they count everything in Bulgaria, they've seen an increase over the years that Marriage Week has been running there. The context is that Marriage Week in Bulgaria is enormous. It's like Christmas everywhere else. Do you know what I mean? It's like, just becomes like, it just infects every strata and every level. So they've seen over the years a 35% increase in marriage, in the rates of couples that are marrying in Bulgaria,
Wow.
and a 15% decrease in divorces in Bulgaria. And in the UK, the divorce rate has stopped increasing, and marriages are lasting longer. Now, all these figures are nuanced because it might be, for example, the divorce rate has stopped increasing because the marriage rate has stopped increasing. Do you know what I mean? You can only get divorced if you are married, for example. And then also, I think another caveat is that in my country, because cohabiting is no longer stigmatized, so there's no couples that cohabit, all the shame has gone now, which is a good thing. It means that the couples that are marrying are couples that probably really want to marry, whereas previously you'd get a percentage that would marry because they felt under parental pressure.
Yeah,
to do
it's a
so.
social expectation.
Yeah, so it might be like it might be. I mean, the point is these figures are not black and white. They're nuanced. They're complex, and even when you adjust for controls and all the rest of it, it's still ambiguous.
Yeah. So, but it's an indication. Well, maybe it's good to ask. Well, what is so special about marriage? Why not just simply cohabit? What research has there been done on this question?
Yeah, here you go. Here's the big issue. What's the difference between cohabitation and marriage? If it's just a piece of paper, you know, who wants to shed loads of money on a piece of paper or the rest of it? Well, the truth is, from the outside looking in, it looks the same, doesn't it? If you cohabit or you marry, you know, you share the same washing machine, the same bed, you know, the rent on a place or your mortgage or whatever. So it looks the same. So in order to understand, is there a difference? You have to step back a little bit and say, well, what are the researchers telling us? Which is interesting. And then you step back a bit further and go, like, well, what's the difference? Well, there's a series of differences. The first difference is, okay, that if you marry, you're entering a legal institution. So everybody knows the beginning and the end. They understand what you've done. And also historically, you know, you can look up who married whom from the register of churches going back hundreds and hundreds of years, as opposed to who was cohabiting with whom hundreds of years ago. Nobody knows because it's immaterial, you know. So you got the legal and historical context, and you got the context of a wedding. The idea of a wedding is it adds loads of value. So, for example, you wear a wedding dress, which you're never going to wear any other time. And you approach the church or the register office and you make these ridiculously ambitious vows / promises in front of people, and that is really important. And Sorry, I'm a bit distracted because my phone's ringing. I just put it over there. And it's a bit like if you look at other things that we have in life that are marked out as significant, like a christening, for example. Everybody gathers around to put the infant in like a white smock, and the priest says special things. When you graduate from university, well, if you graduate from Cambridge University, I didn't, but I know people who do. What you do is you wear this ridiculous costume, you go down, you kneel before the vice chancellor, and in Latin you beg for him to give you as a favour your degree, irrespective of whether you've earned it or not. And we do these things to mark ceremonies in life, and these things are distinctly public. They're not private. There's nothing private about any of these. Likewise, a wedding is public. Anybody in the Church of England, if there's a wedding going on, they can wander in, sit in the back and watch it all. It's not private. These things are distinctly public, and we dress up and we look ridiculous wearing these particular things because that's what culture has suggested, and that's what we identify with, and we say, yeah, that's important. That's how we mark things in life, as opposed to the shabbiness of a couple that just privately and quietly go, oh, let's just share an apartment and everybody will get used to it. Do you know what I mean? So and that has a shaping effect on the relationship. So if you begin in a shabby, quiet, understated kind of way, you're likely to continue like that. Whereas, you know, if you do it in a big way, a brassy way, with a white dress and all the rest of it, everybody knows, apart from everything else, everybody knows you're having sex. It's exclusive and it's public. There's nothing private here. Everybody knows what's going on. And so that adds value, and that has a shaping effect on you as a couple. So that when you then encounter trouble and strife, which is inevitable, you go like, well, no, we made a decision. Look, there's the photo hang. Now, I know it doesn't always work. You know, I'm not immune to, you know, the level of divorce and stuff, but you're more likely to work at it if you're married. You're more likely, particularly for men who are married, you're more likely to live longer than if you cohabit. Why is that? Because if the woman you live with is your wife, she then becomes a stakeholder in your body to a greater extent than if you were cohabiting. So she's more likely to say, look, go to the doctor and get it checked out. Whereas if you're cohabiting, you might not get the finger out. You might go like, look, I really would like you to, because you're slightly nervous about the relationship. Likewise, couples who are married, that they are statistically financially better off because they're more likely to invest in the longer term than the short term, because they have a greater level of security and confidence in the sustainability of the relationship. And so spiritually, the wedding evokes a higher calling. Not that you have to be a Christian to enjoy a happy marriage. That's not the case at all. As a Christian, I believe that marriage is in the context that we all have air to breathe, food to eat, marriages to inhabit. It's not just for the holy few, you know, it's for whosoever. But the key thing is the publicness of a wedding transcends the most fantastic cohabiting thing you can imagine. But it is true, some people, they get married accidentally. I was once on a trip, and this guy, he was telling me he'd been divorced and now he had a new partner, and he was never going to get married because him and his new partner had tried that in the past. It hadn't worked. Fine. I said, that's fine. And then we talked a bit more, and he told me that him and his new partner had a child. And I said, oh, yeah. And then he was excited because they'd had a naming ceremony for this child. And I said, oh, tell me about that. And he said, oh, well, it was in the garden of our house, and we invited our friends and neighbors and all the family. And I said, yeah. He said, and we had food and drink. I said, yeah. And then what? He said, and then at some moment in the afternoon, we held up our infant, and we promised to love and care for this infant for the rest of our lives. And I said, and what else did you say? And he said, and we also promised to love and care for each other for the rest of our lives. So I said to him, my friend, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I think you've just accidentally got married.
Yeah, well, what you're saying is it's the actual making of the promise to each other, but with a lot of witnesses. It's your family, it's your friends, it's your church if you're involved in a church, it's society, it's the state, and it's to God if you believe in God, and making this very public promise, like no other event in your life.
Yeah.
That holds you to it. It keeps you honest, and all these people are witnesses of what you've done, and their expectations are on you in this way, and all of that helps to solidify and stack the odds in favor of an enduring relationship. That's what I hear.
That's it. Yeah, and the publicness is really important. You know, it's you know it's really of value because it does make those big statements to everybody. You know,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing. You know, there's no ambiguity. You know, what we're
And this
saying
is
is,
backed up with scholastic research. You're saying.
yeah,
I guess if you just Google, what are the advantages of marriages, you could come across these
yeah.
this research. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's not just me, but I think one of the key things is obviously this is idealistic, and many couples are cohabiting prior to marriage. What we have to do is we have to help couples transition from cohabitation into marriage. And one of the key things here is that as you marry, then the external validation from aunties, uncles, cousins, neighbors, is one thing to anticipate. So you might go like, oh, all of a sudden, like, for Christmas, we have to send all these Christmas cards from both of us instead of one of us. And there are things you have to do which have to maintain that external validation. But one of the mistakes lots of couples make is in internal validation. So imagine they're cohabiting quite happy and their level of commitment and dedication is at this level. That's fine. Then they marry and the external expectation goes up here. All of a sudden, all these relatives expect you to be turning up at family dues and stuff like that. This external expectation is higher. And what you have to do is you have to improve your internal dedication at that time. So you have to communicate with each other. Before I loved you, but now I really, really love you, and then work that out. So you have an enhanced level of love and dedication compared to what it was before. And when you hear stories about couples that say, "Oh, when we cohabited, we were fine. It's only when we got married it fell apart," it's because they haven't improved their internal level of dedication at that point. Their internal level is still down here, and the external expectations up there, and there's a mismatch.
What would you say to a couple who say, well, we want to live together to begin with, to try it out before we take the step of getting married?
Well, I'd say obviously the vast majority of people are doing that. I think ideally you wouldn't do that. Ideally, I mean, you may be involved in a sexual way, but I wouldn't really want to move in until you marry. That's because of this. If it doesn't, once you move in and you're sharing rent, you're sharing bills, you might have a dog, you might have a cat. If you're not 100%, it's very difficult to leave. It's very awkward to walk away. You accidentally trap yourself in something that you concentrate on the enhancements, which are obvious. But the difficulty is, if you're not 100%, you just tend to slide along. Nobody ever makes a decision. And I've met loads of young adults, and they basically said to me, "Look, I don't really want to spend the rest of my life with her, but I'm a bit stuck because I can't get out without creating a massive drama. You know, we both become homeless and all this. It's really difficult, you know. So I would say, you know, keep your own places until you marry. And then when you marry, that's the time to go, okay, now we're in for it. Now we chop off the old and we create a new. But if you do that prior and you're not 100%, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm still testing you out. Do you know what I mean? I'm testing you out until we marry. And the whole idea of the engagement time is that during the engagement, you can walk away. You know, you can call it quits. But of course, if you're cohabiting and sharing everything, that's really difficult to do.
So I think I hear you saying that the laying of proper foundations is very key. I mean, nobody in their right mind goes and builds a house without laying foundations, but we do it all the time with marriage.
Yeah, we do.
I mentioned at the start there about Robert Schuman affirming the Christian ethics and understanding that the ideal of chastity outside of marriage and fidelity within marriage. What erodes when you change those boundaries?
Well, the way you begin your relationship has a shaping effect on it. So if you begin it as a disciplined and a measured kind of way, then that has a shaping effect on it. So you're more likely then, as the relationship matures, to continue in a measured, responsible, and considerate kind of way. Whereas, you know, if you start going out on Tuesday and you move in on Thursday, and I know people who've done this, you know, fair enough, it's their choice. Well, then that also has a shaping effect on the relationship. So if you do that, you know, and you go, oh well, I did it because you know I need sex or something like that, and then like if you're away from home, the other person goes like, well, hold on a minute, it's like they couldn't wait before, so who are they sleeping with this evening? Because I know they must have sex, for example, you know.
Yeah.
And
So
so
there's a trust issue involved. There's an erosion of trust. And of
yeah, well,
course,
if you begin with communicating like, oh, I'm in this area of my life, I have no control, then why would you later on in life have control?
yeah, it's an easy in, easy out way. But if you know that your partner's setting high standards, it
Yeah.
increases trust. Yeah.
But but I'm not but equally, I know that, you know, this is epidemic, you know, so you have to ask yourself the question here, you know, is our relationship here, is it a ladder that we're taking steps on that ends up in marriage, or is it like, if so, I think you can do that, you know. So it might be you start going out on Tuesday and you move in on Thursday, but then what you might do on Saturday is get some paper out and you go, okay, well, here's our relationship, here's the objective, which is marriage, this is where we are now. Okay, so what are the marks along the way? You know, what are the steps? Because I'd like, you know, 84% of young adults would like to be in a marriage, so they're not like immune to the attractiveness. So what we're going to do is help people to identify what the steps are in dedication, love, commitment, so they can successfully transition from what started out a bit chaotically to something which is like mature, established, and public.
Now, so Richard, I'm going to ask you two more questions before we finish. The first one is, what do you encourage couples to do during marriage week? And it sounds like that's a very good exercise, what you just talked about. That was my first question, and I'll tell you the second later.
Well, why don't we explore this? I mean, the idea of Marriage Week is, you can do anything as long as it's enhancing and building up your relationship. But you might get a slice of paper out and go like, "This is where we are now. This is where we want to be." So how do we identify along the way so that we can identify what the steps are and what the outcomes are, so that we know we're heading in the right direction and we've agreed together, this is the objective, this is what we want. That would be a great thing for people to do this Marriage Week. And it doesn't have to be, you could do it as a group. You can get all your mates together and go like, what are you going to have? This is what I'm going to have, and just kind of create it together in the pub or church or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the second question, I can't remember. Did you ask me?
Well, I haven't told you the second question yet. What typically, I mean, give us some tips as to what people can do. Some of us have in our imaginations. What should we do? What makes this week special?
All right. A great thing you can do is you can go to the bookshop and you can find a thin book on how to have a happy marriage. There's loads of them everywhere. And you take it home. And the worst thing you can do is read it. And the best thing you can do is to read a chapter and then hand it over to your partner/spouse and say, you read this chapter now, and then we'll talk about it. Because if you read the whole thing, what you do is internally you create a list of like, this is what you need to improve by, and it just becomes a source of irritating contention that nobody would really want. But if you read a chapter and they say, I'm not going to read anymore till you read your bit, and then we can talk about it, that's a great way to improve and to celebrate the Marriage Week,
Okay.
And so yeah, that's great. I'd do that.
Yeah. What else? Something romantic?
Well, if you live in a city or in Europe, you could go online and you'd be able to find a Marriage Week event somewhere near you. It might be in a church, it might be in a village hall, it might be somewhere else. I had a guy once in our church, and I said to him, I've never seen you here before. What are you doing here? He said, well, I read in the newspaper there was a renewal of vows here for Marriage Week. And he said, I've always wanted to do that. So me and the wife and our son and his wife, we thought we'd come along and renew our vows. And I said, that's great. And they renewed their vows and off they went. And so you just need to do a bit of research. Just go online and Google, say, is there a National Marriage Week event near me? And go to it.
Can you think of anything really unusual anybody has done on Marriage Week? And you thought, wow, that's out of the box.
The Polish people are mad. I mean, in a good way. They dress up in fancy dress and go swimming in the Baltic.
in February.
Yeah.
Okay. I know some countries celebrate it. I think Ukraine celebrates it in May, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an old.
Okay, well, here's my last question, Richard. What are you and Marie going to do this week? Are you going to get home in time?
Yeah, well, we haven't planned anything yet.
Okay.
Because and this is inevitable because this is the busiest time of the year, So, we'll do something, but I mean. We're not missing out on romantic moments through the year. We have
what you're saying is you're going to do something spontaneous. Great. Keep spontaneity in your relationship.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I got a dinner date with my wife tonight.
Oh, have you? Oh, great. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Where are you going to go?
Oh, a nice restaurant she had her eye on. So.
Oh, great. Lovely. Well, I hope
Richard, thank you very much indeed. This has been really very stimulating sharing, and really, I think many people watching will be very grateful for all your input. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're going to close off here next month. We're going to be joined by Jim Memory and other members of his editorial staff at the Vista Missions Journal. And we're going to be talking about why are European voters moving further right and what are going to be the consequences of that. So you're welcome to join us next month, March 9th at 6 p.m. But thank you very much for being with us tonight. God bless.